So today is Good Shepherd Sunday. Yeah, I know a lot of us in this room are really diehard, faithful attendants to the church calendar, and you would have been upset with me if I didn't bring that up. I want to point out something. The fact that we even have an annual church calendar with some special memorials, special remembrances crafted in there, means that our spiritual predecessors, our spiritual ancestors, looked at some of these themes and motifs that come up in Scripture and said, that's so important. We need to remember that every year. We have 52 Sundays in a year most of the time. One of them should talk about like the Good Shepherd. But we're doing a narrative lectionary. For those of you who have never heard this before, what that simply means is I've chosen for us to focus on a single gospel every year, as well as some Hebrew Bible texts before Christmas time, to try to get more of a scope of things. And part of that is because I think it's valuable for us to try to investigate what the text is saying, spend some time with it, but to also let these things breathe. So that means we're only going to have this particular text come up at least once every 4 years, not every Sunday. The Good Shepherd is a beloved image. One of the commentators that I read in preparation for this said that they think half of all Christian art must be this. And I think that's probably wrong. There's a lot of crucifixion scenes of Jesus. I think that's probably number one. Next might be like little baby Jesus, right?
Walking on water.
Yeah, walking on water. This is at least in the top 5 though, right? Like if you're doing a tier list, this still goes in the S tier, is one of the all-time. We love this image. So I think part of why this is so beloved is because it's such a tender depiction of Jesus. It gets a lot of play. And yet, most of us really bristle if people call us sheep, right? We love Jesus the shepherd. We're not so keen on us as sheep, though, right? If you hear, most of the time, Sharon, if somebody calls us sheep, they don't mean like, oh, what a cutie, Maybe when we've got some kiddos around us, I've heard my mother-in-law call Imogen like, oh, look at this little lamb. Nobody's like calling me a little lamb in a kind way. They'd be like, oh, look at this sheep. He just follows wherever the culture says he needs to go, or they just blindly follow their leader. Sheeple. And I don't think pastors help this at all. I've heard more messages about how gross and awful sheep are like us and how fitting that is because we're the worst than I've heard, actually, shepherds really care about their sheep, And that is a point you could make with this passage. I just don't think it's a good one. And I don't think it's what our writer is intending for us to get from this passage. The point of this passage isn't humans are gross like sheep. If you're wondering, if you've never been around sheep, they're stinky. Yeah. The point is not like, hey, you're mindless. The point is not you're led easily astray. That's not the point the comparison's trying to make. The point the comparison's trying to make is you're actually precious. You're beloved. Shepherds throughout the Hebrew Bible, and we get echoes of this. This is an intentional echo of this Hebrew Bible theme, are seen as being fierce and brave as they protect their sheep. Because those sheep are their livelihood. Right, yeah, I know. I had a swan peck at my flip-flopped feet once.
Yeah.
Like, what an adorable, really scary creature. So for some context of what this passage is getting at, we have to go in our time machine back a couple of months to the man born blind passage, where Jesus heals that gentleman. And the reason why we're going in the time machine is, I was saving this text. I wanted to save this text for this point, for Good Shepherd Sunday, because I knew all of you would be mad if we didn't save it for this Sunday, right? No, I think it's cool when we get a chance of like some synergy like this. You might be in a coffee shop after this and hear somebody else talking about how gross and awful sheep are. That they heard it from their pastor. So are we. Hopefully, though, you could be like, actually, that's not the point that's trying to happen here. Like, you're not an awful, horrible, stinky person. You're precious. And in this story of the man born blind, after Jesus heals the man, he's taken in front of the Pharisees, religious leaders, who have a lot more in common with Jesus than we tend to think, because they're often they're pitted against each other often in these stories. But it's that problem we have when we're really close to another group, but we differ on some important identity markers, right? So the Pharisees and Jesus, they have a lot in common, but Jesus has a lot of criticism about some of their values, the value disconnect. And one of the disconnects they have in this story is that Jesus healed this man who was born blind on the Sabbath day. It's a day of rest. How dare he? A holy person wouldn't do that. Jesus' point is, if it's in your ability to help, you should. So we get some of that disconnect. And they're talking to the man born blind, and they're like, hey, this has got to be a hoax, right? Just say it's a hoax, okay? Can you just say that it didn't really happen? No, it happened. This is my truth. I'm telling you my truth. I was born blind, and I'm not blind anymore. That's not who I am anymore. That's who I was. And I'm not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. That happens. And they're like, well, we're kicking you out of all the synagogues then. And there's a part of me that squirms a little bit when I hear that. Because a lot of us have had that experience of unwelcome, right? We wanted you until you didn't toe the line, and then we gave you the boot. So Jesus encounters the man again, and as Jesus is wont to do, he starts preaching. And he preaches this passage of the Good Shepherd. And his point is, look, this guy, he's wanted. I'm the sheep gate. By the way, Jesus as the sheep gate, not as popular an image. It's a little too weird for us to picture. He says, I am the sheep gates. What does a sheep gate do? It protects the sheep. What does it protect the sheep from? From predators and from thieves and bandits. Like you guys, Jesus is saying, like you religious leaders who are seeking to hurt this guy by kicking him out. You're predatory, and I'm protecting folks like him from you. That's what I'm seeking to do. And this kind of goes over their head, and Jesus has to break it down. He has to spell it out. Maybe they also got stuck on the image of Jesus as a literal sheep gate. They're like, can't do it. And then he shifts the metaphor, like all good storytellers do. You got to mix those metaphors. That's what they teach you in writing class. Some of you are like, don't. And that's where he makes this transition to the shepherd. I'm the good shepherd. What does the good shepherd do? The good shepherd protects the sheep, looks after the sheep, cares for the sheep. The good shepherd is invested in the well-being of the sheep, not like a hired hand or a caretaker who's trying to make their livelihood out of it. You know, when the wolf comes in, when the wolf breaks into a sheep pen, understandably, the hired hand's like, that's not in my job description. You know what? No job's worth dying over. I'm out of here, right? Jesus is like, but the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. His point is, I'm not like the wolves who are seeking to prey on you. I'm not like these religious leaders who are behaving predatorily towards you. I'm not even like the hired hands, the caretaker. I'm so invested in your well-being that I'm willing to lay my life down for you. That's how precious and beloved you are to me. That's his point. I wish this passage that seems to get remembered every single year by most Christians, or at least most churches around the world, I wish it was taken seriously by our leaders who put themselves in the position of representing Jesus as a religious leader. So we had a little bit of an article from a group I don't quote very much, the Christian Reformed Church, because I'm not part of that tradition, about Ravi Zacharias. When I was growing up, Ravi Zacharias was a big voice. He was hard to escape. Part of that's because he's over in the Beaverton area. Then, about 15 years ago, Stephanie and I were backpacking through Latin America. And we encountered this person who I met in a church camp once upon a time. And he was like, hey, if you're ever in Chile, look me up. And so I did. And he wanted us to go meet him over in Chiloé Islands to help him build an apocalypse shelter. That's not what he told us we would be doing. That was a really bad, weird day. And he was like, hey, I would really love, I think God has told me that you are here to help me sell recordings of sermons that have been translated into Spanish throughout Chile. I'm like, God has not told me that. Did God also tell you to build this apocalypse shelter? I don't know if we're talking to the same God. It's a little weird to me. Yeah. And he had all of these recordings that have been translated of Ravi Zacharias sermons. And a lot of it was like apologetics, Christian defense stuff. And then a few years ago, I am associate pastor over at Cedar Hills United Church of Christ, our friends over 45 minutes away from here, down the street from Mr. Zacharias. Can't escape this guy. He once butted heads with Mary Sue, our pastor, when she was talking about, like, predatory leaders. He's like, God will work it out. Like, okay. And then something really typical happens. This leader, this religious leader, this pious man that we should follow, right, dies. And all this ick comes out of the woodwork. All of this scandal. And it's to the point that this is not like unconscionable, I've never heard of this stuff anymore. It's just typical. It is so dishearteningly typical that our religious leaders, and many of our political leaders, have embraced this most toxic aspect where they're like, I actually think that Good Shepherd passage, that's great and all, but what if what if I actually preyed on my sheep? What if I use them for my own gain? What if I just devour them? Who's going to care? And I think some of the song and dance that goes in that is, look how much good I'm doing over here. So surely it's okay if I do a little evil here. Like somehow it balances out. I know it's not unique to pastors either. It is such a problem throughout our churches and throughout other religious institutions, but it's a problem we have to be mindful of and protect against in nonprofit world too, right? And when we're pursuing our own political gains of matters that really are quite important today, how often do the scandals come out then? One of the points that I want to urge is, if you've been taken advantage of, or if somebody you love has been taken advantage of, or if you've heard of a neighbor, a colleague, a friend, a stranger being taken advantage of, and you've wondered, where's Jesus in all of this? Where's God in any of this? I'd say God is on the side of that person. That person is not supposed to have been taken advantage of. That is not the will of God. Doesn't matter how leaders justify it to themselves. That person, just like you, is precious and beloved. And they were not supposed to be devoured by wolves, or scratched, or clawed, or hurt and harmed, however that person dismisses it. However the leaders around them might dismiss it. That is not the will of a loving God. That is the will of somebody hiding behind the idea of a loving God, or behind justice, or behind peace. You can promote something really good and important and do harm. Cesar Chavez was such an inspiring story for so many of us, right? So much so that we celebrated, many of us celebrated when the street was named after him. And now, stuff's come forward that makes it really problematic for us to celebrate Cesar Chavez. I think we can hold on to some of the wins in there while also calling evil evil, right? I wish we didn't have to, but that's the time in which we live. I hope that when you leave this place, if there's a part of you that's hurting right now, that feels like you've been betrayed by somebody that you followed, that you believed in, I hope you know that wasn't supposed to happen. That wasn't the will of God. You didn't have it coming. You don't deserve it. You are not a gross, dumb, stinky sheep. You are a precious and beloved Lamb of God. Even more, you're a precious and beloved child of God. And when you go out into the world, I hope that we can be people who pursue the good, who continue to try to join in causes that are worth our investment of heart and soul, while also holding our leaders accountable. And one last thing. While I strive to be a pastor who goes in through the sheep gate, at the end of the day, I'm just a sheep too, like the rest of us in this room. And if you ever have an issue where you feel like you've been harmed by me, you can talk to me about it. And if you feel like I'm unsafe to talk to about it, you can talk to the council. And if you feel like the council is unsafe to talk about it with, you can go to our conference. That's part of the reason why I appreciate this denomination. because nobody should be above accountability. Right?